Hi out there in radio and YouTube land, it's Ham Radio Man Oz with episode number 5. Now before we get to the intro, of course, I'll just give you a little bit of information. I've been trying to work very hard on the rendering qualities and the video aspect of these videos. You may notice a little bit of difference between the first couple of videos. Some are saying HD and others aren't. Why is that? It's a matter of getting the file size and the quality to be reasonable, because I want you guys to have good quality, but also the file size is very important. The bigger the file, the longer it's going to take to upload to YouTube, and I want to try and keep the file size as down as minimum as possible. So I think I've found it, and hopefully this video will show you both good quality and also allow me to upload it in time for you to enjoy it. Now, other things I've done as well is I've made some alterations to the title, the intro. I've added a few things in just to make it a little bit more interesting and showing you some of the things that we will be touching on in future videos. So let's roll that credit, Mr. Ham Radio Man. And we're back. Okay, so this is episode number 5, and what am I going to talk about today? I'm going to talk about digital modes. Digital modes that you'll be able to do all your radio work with. Digital modes include things like BSK, PSK, even CW to some form is a digital mode, but it's not true digital because you're sending the tones, whereas the computer sends the tones, or the radio sends the tones for most actual digital modes. But there's a very popular one right now, and this is what this video will be about. And that particular digital mode has become the most popular digital mode to use today to make brief, quick contacts all around the world, minimum power. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about Jt65. And today I'm going to show you how it works, how to do it. It's easy. And you too can make a lot of contacts around the world using Jt65. So let's get into it. Okay, so one of the first things I'm going to show you is the radio setup. Now, for this example, I'm using the ICOM 7300. Now, it's a really great radio, but there's one thing, well, there's a few things that annoy me about the ICOM 7300, and I'll go into those in a later video. But let's go into what you would normally do to set up for Jt65 work, no matter what radio you're using. There's a few things you want to know. Some people will say, regarding the ALC level, some people will say, oh, you need a good ALC level, full power all the way, and others will say no ALC, and others will say halfway and all this. Well, I don't know. Personally, I just know what works for me, and what works for me better is no ALC. So when I'm transmitting, when I first tried this experiment with Jt65, I had the ALC was all the way up the red. It was full scale. My power, RF power, was adjusted down to 5%. I now have it at 30%. I had 5% power, full ALC, and everything was working quite nicely. I was still getting contacts, but the interference, the amount of noise that was going across the band was, probably quite a lot, and coming through the speakers of my computer and everything like that was just chaos. So what I found was that I dropped my ALC right down. I increased my RF power up to 20%, 25, and now 30. Watching, of course, the temperature on my radio at all times, and also making sure that I'm not putting out too much heat into the radio, because you don't want that. Because what a lot of people have got to remember is with Jt65, it is 100% key down at the power level you set for 45 to 50 seconds. Now you don't need a lot of power. 5 to 10 watts is the recommended minimum, or even the maximum for doing it. 5 to 10 watts, 15 at the most really. And at 30% RF power on this thing with my ALC adjusted right down, I'm only putting out 15 watts. So 20% power and I'm putting out about 10 watts. Don't just go on the percentage of, okay, I'm at 30% power, so it must be 30 watts. No, because everything is related to how much you adjust everything else. Now, if I use my 450D, it's got the power output in watts, and this doesn't. This has percentage, and that can be a little confusing. So at 30% RF with no ALC, it's about 15 watts. And we're doing quite nicely, and my radio transmits quite nicely. And with no ALC, the ALC is completely off. I'm getting better contacts, more contacts than I've ever gotten before. Places like Italy, Spain, Argentina, Hungary, they're pouring in. So I don't know what the myth about ALC is. All I know is what works for me is no ALC, a reasonable level of modulation, and a reasonable small amount of power. And that's what we're talking, small amount of power. Now if I go into my settings here, and I was just talking about modulation, and this is one very important thing. Now my USB modulation level is currently set on 23%, which is a very good level for it to modulate at, because the program, the software, which I'll get into in a moment, will do more than that. So between 20 to 25% USB modulation, if you're using the 7300, is more than enough. I also put the ACC mod level to the same, to about 22-23%. In fact, I'll bring that to 23. I keep them both the same. The accessory USB IF output is at 50%, so the IF output stays at 50%. And that's really it. And then we've got the other settings. I use a data mod off, which goes on USB, and data mode is on USB. Now you don't need to worry about anything else really. You don't need to worry about the CIV connections. You don't need to worry about anything else, because there's two ways of using this particular program. And there's two programs I'm going to show you. One is called Jt65 HF and the other is called Jt65 DX, and both have very good merit, and both will work with any radio that you choose. The only difference is if you use Jt65 HF with the 7300, you need to use Ham Radio Deluxe software to get it to key the radio. With the Jt DX one, you don't need to use Ham Radio Deluxe. So two different methods. Alright, and the frequency that we will use is always usually around the 76 mark. In this case 40 meters, we'll be using 7076. Let's get that right. 20 meters 14076, so on. The frequencies are all set, standard, and that's what they all use. And it's always going to be upper sideband. Now don't put your radio into data mode because unless that's the only way that it works. Sometimes with the 450D it automatically goes into data mode, but it also is decoding straight out of USB, because all we want is straight USB, upper sideband. And if I put that into the scope, we might even see some transmissions. The band might be a little bit quiet today. It was busy this morning, but it might be a little bit quiet now. So let's go up to the 14 megahertz. Let's go up to 20 meters. There's a bit of noise interference there this morning, but we will see if we can't find something out there. And you'll hear the tones, they're Pacific tones that are made. Alright, let's get into the software. Okay, so we're coming back now with the software, and the software that I'm showing you first up is called Jt65 HF. Now this one here, if you're using a 7300, you will need to have Ham Radio Deluxe, because Ham Radio Deluxe takes control of this software, Jt65 HF for keying. Now, I don't know quite what it is with the 7300, but the 7300 just will not key off this one at the moment. Maybe if you have a CIV cable as well, you can. But I'm only using the USB cable that came with the radio, and that's all you need to get started with Jt65 if you've got the 7300. Now, mind you, if you're using any other radio, whether you're using 450D Yaesu, 757GX, which I also have 757GX, which is a very old radio, and I can still do Jt65 with that. All you require is an interface, because what we're talking about is getting a digital signal from the computer into the radio. Now, modern radios have it easy. The 450D, you will need an interface, and I use an interface on that one called the SCU17. And for my older radio, the 757GX, I use an interface that was made in England from a guy I bought, and that was in video number 1. So it doesn't matter what radio you've got. You can do it another way too. You can get a little tiny speaker and put that next to your microphone, like those portable little speakers. Put it next to your microphone. I know a guy who does this, and he puts a rubber band around the speaker and the microphone. He puts the radio into Vox Mode, and then he uses the adjusts the volume, very small volume on the radio if you're going to do it that way, very small volume. And then when he transmits or receives any signal, of course the received signal is coming out the speaker or the AF output of the radio into the computer to decode. But when you transmit, you want to start off with very small volume of level. So if you're using a little speaker next to the microphone and put the radio into Vox, it will work. There's no problem with that. You're just going to make that digital signal go into the audio process. Alright, so let's get into the software. First of all, you'll notice with this software is this waterfall display up the top here. Now with the waterfall display, you can change that to any particular color map you want. In this case, it's on blue. I'm going to change it to Linrad, because I actually like Linrad probably better. It's a little bit easier, but there are options there for grey, grey zero, and green with this one. Not a lot of options, but enough. And you've got brightness, contrast, speed control, gain control, smoothing out, so on. Don't really worry about touching any of those. Just leave them as their defaults. Just change the color map if you want to that. Up the top here we have our audio input level. Now this is the crucial part, guys and girls. You'll see here that it's flashing sometimes from black to red. And I'm only selected the left channel. Even though the right channel is still receiving audio, you can only have one channel selected at a time. You don't need them both. And the reason it's flashing is because when it's black, it's receiving the audio at a good level. When it's on red, it's a little bit noisy for it. The ideal level setting for this program is to have that on 0. When of course it's idle, you want to have it on 0 when it's idle, and that way it's only receiving the background noise. It is set on 0 for this one when it's on idle, but because there's signal coming in, of course it's going to go up and down. You have level adjusters over here, which you can use to adjust. And if I drop that back just a little tiny bit so the left is -1, you'll see now that the signal has dropped down and it's staying in the black area. And ideally that's what we want to try and do. Well, it was sort of in the black area. Well, let's drop it down again to a -2, and you'll see how it goes to 0, and now it's sort of staying in the black. Now, it might be that because this signal that's coming in right here is a very strong signal. So that's what you want ideally, is when you set it up, when there's no signal present, is you want it to have 0. And it doesn't really matter from there on what happens. I'm just going to take that back to 0 because that was my default setting. You'll see here that there are some very strong signals coming in. Now those very strong signals, they might not decode very well. That doesn't mean to say you can't decode them, just means that they're really strong and you're going to have to knock your audio back. Once you've got your audio set, you'll find that most stations will decode and they'll come in pretty well. You'll see down here you've got the frequency that we're on, which is 14076, which is controlled by Ham Radio Deluxe. The time and date, of course, it's very important, because the way that Jt65 works is it works on the odd and even numbers of time, and I'll get into that in a moment. And here we've got clear decodes, so I can clear all these away and decode again if I want to try and get it to decode something again. And of course, here are the stations that have been transmitting. And you'll see in the green ones here are the ones that are calling CQ. So we've had VK4GO calling CQ and FK8GX calling CQ. And then this is the conversation going on here that shows at 2312 UTC that VK2, we're down this one, FK8GX answered VK2 FAD. Now VK2 FAD has acknowledged him with a roger, roger, roger. Now what's missing in between that are the signal reports, which were obviously pretty strong, and it didn't decode very well, but you would send a signal report. Now here is an area where you can send out your own text, and of course the text generated, and TX transmitting for odd time and even time, and calling CQ, answer CQ, send roger roger, send 73s, and so on. Down here is the text default, transmission default, and the receiving default tones. This little DT offset up here, by the way, which I didn't touch on, don't touch it. Don't worry about it, because if you do, it just screws everything up. So don't worry about it. What it does and why it's there, I don't know. I don't use it. It doesn't affect me. A couple of important things to note, though, if you do use this software. First of all, down here, sound in and sound out. You need to make sure that they're set correctly, that you've got your sound coming in correctly and your sound is going out on the right one. In this case, through the USB audio codec for the 7300. When you do use this program and you're going to call CQ, the first thing you want to do is this little one up here, TXDF equals RXDF, untick it. Turn on your AFC, turn on your noise blanker, enable the multi, enable RB, which is the reverse beacon network, and the PSK reporter. And that's very good, because the PSK reporter, if you go to the PSK reporter website, you can type in your call sign, and I'll show you that later. And you can then see who's receiving you, how far you're getting out, and monitor that at all times. And this is really good. So the way it normally would work is, okay, you call CQ, or you're answering CQ. So you would double click a CQer, and then this would move. So if you're going to answer a CQer, you would tick the TXDX so you can line up to him, double click then the CQ, and this red bar will move across in the frequency ranges up the top here to match his signal. And when you're calling CQ, turn it off. And he'll come back to you with a response, and it will be in red. If he's heard you and responded to you, it will be in red, and then you simply will answer him back. So the way it normally works is a CQ call is called, you will answer the caller. It would basically send out his call sign, your grid location. He'll come back with a signal report in dB, which the program automatically does for you. It automatically calculates the dB, and then you will send back your signal report by sending a report, and he'll come back with a roger, 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 like this one has here, and then a 73, and you'll send a 73, and that's the end of that. And then you can log that QSO and load it into your favorite logging software as well. So that's that program, and basically how to get started. There's a few things about this program I really like, a couple of things about it I don't like. One of the things I don't like about it is the audio sensitivity of it. It is very, very sensitive with the audio, but it is very easy to use. Now, if you come up to the settings, this is where it all takes place. Of course, you put in your call sign, Okay, you can probably see mine there anyway. Your grid location, and of course then you adjust your speakers. And then down here, don't forget to change the location of where you want the contacts saved. Now this is the important part, the rig control. You make sure you have the COM port selected, that your radio is on. And if you're not using a COM port, if you're using an older radio and just the audio interface, well, you'll still have to set up a COM port for a PTT. So that's very important. Down here, if you're using the 7300, you have to use the HRD, Ham Radio Deluxe, for PTT. And that's quite okay, because when you change the frequencies on your Ham Radio Deluxe, it will change the frequencies to match in the other thing, in the software. Just make sure you've got Ham Radio Deluxe enabled. It also supports OmniRig and Commander if you use either of those programs. For the RB, the reverse beacon, and the PSK reporter, just put in your call sign and some information about your antennas or whatever. Macros, you have default macros, which are the frequencies, and you can assign other type of macros as well in there. And again, full instructions. Colors, you can change all the colors if you don't like. Green for the CQ calls, you can change that. Red for answering calls, and so on and so on. So you can change all that as well. And the diagnostics, don't really know what it does. No one seems to really understand it. It just doesn't matter, because everything works. So then you just save your settings and go. And there's one other thing in the settings where you've got here, disable TX after sending the same message excessively. That's very important. Both programs have that, so that you don't constantly transmit. And you can set that to as many times as you like. I normally go with about 5. I'll transmit my CQ for 5 times. Disable the multicoder while in QSO. I don't worry about that unless you've got a really slow computer. Enable multicoder after 2 minutes of no TX. Restore defaults, and then I send a CWID with 73 or free text after I send the 73 message. And draw a divider line. Now this is one thing that's vital for you to do, is draw a divider line. The divider line is simply this red line that's going across the screen right now, which separates the time on the actual timing. So you'll notice here that it's 23:22. This is where it started at 23:22. It's receiving because I'm not transmitting, and then at 23:23 there'll be another red line where it starts receiving again. So it's very important though with the time too, I'll just touch on that, to note when a CQ is answered or called. So okay, let's take this one up the top here. He's called his CQ at 23:19. So you would answer him. Well, if you double click him, it'll automatically change to the even. But if you want to call a CQ or whatever, you can choose to call it on the even or the odd. If somebody responds to you, you don't respond to them on the same time, like even or odd. It has to be the opposite. So if somebody calls CQ on the even, you'll respond on the odd. If somebody calls CQ on the odd, you'll respond on the even. And the decoding time is very quick. So you have to look at that. You'll get used to that. It's very, very simple. And then once you finish your QSO, log your QSO, and so on. So that's the Jt65. It's very simple to use. And the next program I'm going to show you is the other JTDX. Now I'm going to close my Ham Radio Deluxe because I don't need it for this one. I'm going to say no, leave the radio on. So this is the one I'm actually getting used to now. I'm actually preferring this one, JTDX. Now there's WSJTX and JTDX. There's 2 variations of the program. It's the same program made by the same one. All you got to do is Google Jt65 software and you'll find WSJTX and JTDX. They're made by the same person, but JTDX actually supports my radio. It automatically supports the 7300. Now just maximize that screen for a second. And if we go up into the file and we go up into settings, there's my call sign, my grid location, and you can change all the fonts and everything just like you can with the other one. And here's your radio control. And so my IC7300 is set up on the COM4 under CAT with the baud rate. I've just set it at 19.2. Data bits are 8, stop bits are 1. Handshaking is hardware, and we come across to USB. The mode is on USB, not data packet, it's on USB. And split operation none, and when you test the CAT it'll go green, and test the PTT it goes red. Click that off again. Don't leave it on because you'll leave that on. So then you know your radio's all good, and you've got your audio. Don't forget to go through all your location directories where you want things saved, your macros, any macros you want to put in there you can add, prompt you to log it if you forget to. DB reports the comments, enable the PSK reporter spotting. And here's another little add-on that I found, UDP server. There's another little add-on you can get for this one, and I'll show you that in a minute. Here's all your frequencies, colors. Now you got a lot more colors in this program, and you can change those to whatever you like again, but you've got all sorts of different coloring, whereas the other one only had 3 options. This one gives you a lot more options because you got new DXCC and new DXCC on the band and so forth. So you'll have a look at that. And the advanced settings, I don't change any of that. Alright, so then we just go OK on that one. Now the good thing about this one is too that you have your screen over here where your conversations are going on, and these are the received calls that just come up. And you'll see down the bottom here it's receiving, it's in auto mode. Now the audio on this one, I just leave the slider on where it is, but you'll see the signal is right up here at 60 plus, but I just leave the sliders where it is. Same with the power one. That's the audio level output power. I just leave that where it is, and they will pop up on the screen on this one. Now this one also does JT9 as well as JT65 and WSPR2, which are other modes I haven't experimented with. I just leave it on the default JT9 plus JT65, and you have some various other options. This one is a very in-depth program, but it works extremely well. And if I change the frequencies up here, select whatever frequency is currently, whether it's 40 meters, 20 meters, whatever, it will just change it automatically on the radio as it's just done. And of course there's various other features. Make sure that you untick your TX even first. That's your odd and even time selection there, and that's your TX equals RX up there. Untick that unless you're answering somebody, and then you would tick it. But if you're going to do a CQ call, just leave it unticked. And there's your time up there to monitor. So we'll go back onto the 20 meter band, because that's where most of the activity was this morning. And you can change the fonts and everything like that. Now while it's doing that, I'll just bring that back to screen. There's a waterfall that you can have up as well. And normally I run this with 2 monitors. I have a monitor to the side of me, which is where I normally put up my PSK reporter map. And I will look at that from time to time to see where my signal is getting out. And then I'll just watch the waterfall, because the waterfall will show you any signals coming in. And I like this scope a lot better than the other one. As I say, the audio level on this one is a lot easier to work with as well. There's none of that worrying about level 0, so on. I just leave it at the default. It works. You might have to fiddle around with your recording device settings at first. Simply click on your speaker icon, bring up recording devices and the microphone that's in use. And the one thing that you want to do with this is make sure that it's low. The microphone level is low, because when you transmit, especially, you want that to be low. You don't want a full bore signal through. You want that to be very, very low, because otherwise it will splatter, over-modulate, and could even damage your radio. Drop your microphone level to about 5 or 6. That's always very important. And your speaker input, if I go to the speaker one, you'll see that the level on that is up reasonably high. So microphone low, speaker high. That's where I've got mine, and it works quite well. It is pretty noisy on the band at the moment, so there's not a lot coming in at all. But We'll get there. Now here you've got all your other features. Enable the TX, halt your TX. If you stop, you made a mistake, halt your TX, or you don't want to transmit. And you have two different ways of the messages coming up on the screen. So you've got down the bottom, you can choose your CQ calling, answering the station that you want, or you can bring this up a different way where you've got CQDX. You can do a Roger Roger or a Roger Roger 73, grid locations and all that, and you can send your general message or a free text message which you made in the macros. So that's pretty much it. Jt65. It's very easy to use, it's easy to get into. All you need to do is just keep your microphone level down low, your speaker volume up, download the software, link your radio to your computer, and just sit back and listen for a little while, and make sure that you have on your radio low power, 5 to 15 watts maximum. Don't go any more than 5 to 15 watts, and ALC virtually zero. You can have a little bit of ALC, but virtually zero. I get great contacts on those settings. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed the video. This is Radio Man Oz. This is episode number 5. Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, click that like button, and give me all the feedback. If you've got any questions at all, you need to know anything about extra stuff that I haven't maybe felt I've covered, please let me know. Until next time, thanks guys, cheers, and 73.